So now we're going to write the equation of the geometric sequence given r and one of the terms. So one of the terms of a geometric sequence is a5 equals 32, and the common ratio is 2/3. Once again, our equation is an equals a1 times r to the n minus 1. If you actually write it down, every time you do the problem, you'll have the formula memorized without actually having to work at memorizing it. Just write it down every time we do a problem. Okay? So, what do I know so far? Well, we know r, right? What else do we know? In order to write the equation, I need to know a1 and I need to know r.
You know what 1a and it could be a5.
I know a5, right? So I can plug n equals 5 in. And could I plug in an equals 32? And then find out what the first term is? So if I do that, I get an equals 32 equals a1 times 2/3 to the 5 minus 1. Now, let's see, what's 5 minus 1? To the 4th equals 32. And then what is 2/3 to the 4th power? Two to the 4th is 16 over 81. 3 to the 4th is 81. That equals 32. Okay. And that's being multiplied, right? A1 times 16 over 81. So what am I going to do? Multiply by 81 over 16. And these cancel, well, that way. So A1 equals what? 16 goes into 32 twice. 2 times 81 is 162.
So we did all of this to find the starting term.
We had to find the starting term, and then now we can write the rule. So my rule is an equals 162 times 2/3 to the n minus 1.
Wait, what's 2/3 to the... I don't know.
All right, so take a second and do the second problem. One term of a geometric sequence is a6 equals negative 96, and the common ratio is r equals negative 2. So we get an equals 3 times negative 2 to the n minus 1.
Yes. Yes.
Right? Okay.
Whoa.
Next example. When we are writing the equation given two terms, what if we're only given what two of the terms in the sequence are? We know that a3 is 20 and a6 is negative 160. So I'm going to have to use the system of equations. Okay. So can I write my first equation? What is it going to look like? 20 equals a1 to the 3 minus 1, which I can simplify as 20 equals a1 times r squared. A3. Right? So the n is the subscript when it tells you what term it is in that form. And then the an, the term is actually 20. Then I can write another equation, right? Negative 160 equals what? A1 times r to the 6 minus 1, because 6 is my subscript. So that's negative 160 equals a1 times r to the 5th. Now I have two equations and two unknown variables. But I can't use elimination because I don't have like terms that would subtract. So I'm going to have to use substitution. So I can solve for a1. Can I get a1 by itself in this equation? How? Divide by the r squared. So let's divide by r squared. And we can say that a1 is equal to 20 divided by r squared. Then can I substitute 20 over r squared for this a1?
Yeah.
Yes. So negative 160 equals 20 over r squared times r to the 5th.
Wow. This is.
Can my r's cancel? Because I can put a 1 underneath that.
It'd be r to the 3rd.
So negative 160 equals 20r cubed. Divide by my 20. Negative 8 equals r cubed. And how do I get rid of a cube? Cube rooting it. And what is the cube root of negative 8? Negative 2. R equals negative 2. Can I plug it in for a1? 20 over 2, negative 2 squared, right? That's 20 over r squared, which is 20 over 4, which equals 5. So what's my equation? an equals 5 times negative 2 to the n minus 1. Okay. All right, so here's the information for the next problem. A2 is 12. A4 is 3. Try this one by yourself or with your group. Yes. So the difference between the sequence and the series is we are adding them up with the series, right? We're adding up all the terms of the sequence. We have two equations that we get to use. One of them is if I know n, and the other one is if I know an. And it allows us to use the equation we just did less often to find a missing information. So in the first one, the equation is Sn equals a1 times 1 minus r to the nth power divided by 1 minus r. So the important information I need to use this equation is a1, right, r, and n. Agreed? Those are the three variables I need to find S, the sum. The second equation here is a1 minus an times r to the 1 r divided by 1 minus r. So the information I need here is what? A1, an, and r. Now what do they have in common? Both equations need what two things? A1 and r. That means if you know the other information but not a1 or r, you might have to use our sequence formula to find one of those two. Okay? Okay, so I'm going to write our equations here again. Our an is equal to a1 times r to the n minus 1. And when we get sigma notation for the geometric sequences or series, we are going to use this equation, Sn equals a1 times 1 minus r to the n over 1 minus r. The other equation we'll talk about on Monday, okay? We're just going to focus on this equation today. An important part of that is how we do that in our calculators to make sure that we're getting the right answer from our calculators. So I want you to see if you notice any similarities between the general formula and what the rule is written for my sigma notation. No?
R is always to the n.
It's r to the n minus 1 power, kind of, right? But instead of n, it's using I. Does it matter? So what does this 2 probably represent? A1, right? So in our sigma notation, we should notice that this looks like A1, r to the n minus 1 power. So what is A1? 2. What is r?
1.
1/3. And then again, remember that sigma notation means I'm adding up all of the terms, starting with an I of 1, so I could plug in 1, and then I would plug in 2, and then 3, all the way up to 6, right? So how many terms will there be if I add up from 1 to 6? There's 6 of them, right? If I start at 1 and I count up to 6, I have 6 numbers, right? Everybody agree with that? So what is n? N is 6. Okay. And then I just plug my information into my formula. S of 6 terms equals A1, 2, times 1 minus 1/3 to the 6th power, divided by 1 minus 1/3. And it is so important that we use the order of operations correctly here. So I need to do 1/3 to the 6th power first. And if we have our calculators, so we want to do 1/3 to the 6th power in our calculator. So let's look at how to do that with our fraction button. Okay? We have a fraction button. It's right here, the A, B over C. Some calculators look like this, with a box divided by a box. And then here you see the mixed number. So there's a mixed number button you could use there. So I'm going to do 1 fraction button, 3. And then here I would do, okay, that didn't work out for me, 1/3. And then I'm going to raise it to the 6th power. And I'm going to raise this one. Where's your exponents?
You gotta put
Oh, there it is.
is.
To the 6th. Okay, and I should get 1/29 on both of them, right? 1/729. Sorry. Okay. So we get that. I get this equals 2 times 1 minus 1/729. What is 1 minus 1/3? 2/3. Okay. So 2/3 is on the bottom. What's 1 minus 1/129? I hope this shows up in the recording. If I do 1 minus second answer, 1 minus shift, oh, no, there's no shift, just answer, I get 728/729. That should make sense. Because I'm taking like 729/729, right? So I get 2 times 728/729 divided by 2/3. Now in my calculator, if I wanted to, I can times by 2 and then divide by 2/3. But when I see this, I see that I could take that and multiply by the reciprocal 3/2. Right? And then my 2's cancel. Now I'm just multiplying by 3. And 3 goes into 729 243 times. Okay, so 728/243 is my final answer for the sum. Let's look at it in the calculator, though, because most of you don't see that fraction right away, right? So if I take that fraction, I really only need to multiply it by 3, right?
Yeah.
Times by 3, because my 2's canceled. Times by 3. And you see this calculator says 728/243. And this calculator says 2 and 242/243. And to convert it to a mixed number, I hit second to my fraction button again. And I get 728 over 243. So you have to get good at doing fractions in your calculator. Use that fraction button, practice it, make sure you're getting the right answer. In the book, a lot of the answers are going to be written as fractions, and some of them are crazy fractions. So you might want to just take the answer in the book and divide it to get a decimal. Because when these numbers get really big, your calculator can only do a fraction that's so big. Like, it can't have too many numbers in the numerator and the denominator. It just kind of shuts down and says, sorry, I'm going to decimal mode. So you might not be able to make it a fraction, and that's okay. Just do the decimal. Okay? Yes?